point probably 12 times at this point. Everyone's different. This is not about them answering all their questions about their faith. And I just really want to keep kicking, I'm going to say that every week. It's not our purpose, it's not your purpose. Your purpose is to help facilitate part of a journey in their life with them through discussion, through some deeper study on their part as they go through the weeks. Many people don't really start starting point until they close the book. And that's when it really starts for them. And they go away and now they kind of ruminate and chew on this stuff for weeks. And I hear that comment a lot from people who have done starting point. So I say that to take some of the pressure off of you. You're not going to answer everybody's question. It's not going to happen. That's not your intended purpose.
And I'm gonna do something here as well because
we're taking way too long.
Yeah, we're gonna jump to page 25.
All right, keep talking.
Now, I'm doing this, and I'll just do a side note. That is perfectly fine in your session. So if you never get past the first page, that's fine.
Yes, exactly.
This isn't necessarily something where we're going to try to go through, you've got to hit every question. A lot of it is going to kind of be based on the feel of the group and kind of where it goes. So you don't necessarily have to so we're gonna skip forward to and talk about why should I trust the Bible. Now,
before we get there, I'm just going to throw in that normally you would have attempted to get a verse read in every week, and the verse would have been Psalm 19, 1 through 11, and then answer one or two of those questions. So I always, in my book, I just keep a printout of the verse taped to that page, just so I have it.
Why that one in particular? Or is that the only one?
Because that's the one that they write right at the top of page 24. It says, read Psalm 19, 1 through 11 in your Bible and respond to the following questions.
Okay, so you want them to read that particular.
We really want a Bible reading in every week if we can get it in. Brenda and I went through a starting point where I think we did it twice. So we failed.
You did it twice? What do you mean?
We only read verses a couple of times. We had so much discussion going on. We did exactly what we're doing now if we skipped over that page. But if you can get it in, have Bibles handy for people. Have people bring their Bibles so they have them. And you could even have them mark that Bible verse in their book before you start that day, so everybody has it at the ready.
I will point out, kind of as a side note, that verse though is a tough one to talk through in the context of this, because it seems like they make a real jump in, how they use it. I mean, and they even say it in the Leader's Guide. It says, well, it kind of starts off with a very broad, like God's done, put the sun in the tent, and so it starts kind of like that, but then it gets into the real specific about the, His word and the law.
It's really more of a meditative psalm as well as.
Yeah, I will say that one's always like a tough one, and we've all, like anytime we've taught it, it's kind of like.
What does this mean, please, teacher?
Well, can I ask you a question in regards to that? The interesting part to me was it said to read verse 1 through 11, yet it says discuss 7 and 11. So whenever I do that in my class, I find there's a little bit of a problem. Well, what about the first 6?
Yeah.
So why don't we just, do you ever just start at 7?
Yeah.
You do. You actually do. And so, and this happens a lot in here, where you're told, so you can get the bigger picture of what the verse is about, and we're going to zone in on or focus in on a particular area. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does.
Right.
So you usually do start from 1 until 11 and say, well, let's look at a particular part.
No, what I particularly say is, having read 1 through 11, because you've done your homework, let's go right to 7. Let's just have you read 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Okay. Yeah, you don't.
Because we know you did your homework.
I did.
Yeah. And this lends itself to people not being prepared as well.
Exactly.
So you can kind of like talk through it. Now, what I did is I just handed out. That came from the Starting Point website, and I think it goes back, as you were saying, is kind of Andy Stanley was kind of rattling through some of the documents, and this is just a chart where it shows these different historical documents. And what I think is interesting is it shows, from the time period of when it happened to when this was actually written, And then it shows how many versions there are, or how many different copies there are of these. And that for a lot of our documentation that we, read in history, things like that, there's oftentimes there's a big gap between the time that it was written and that it actually occurred, and that you find out that there's only maybe a few documents that have this in there. But then when you look at something like the New Testament and you see, it's relatively within a person's lifetime, of where, and that's always like that can be a problem for people. And people initially, they'll hear something and they may say, well, it was, I heard that it was written hundreds of years later, so how did they know? But actually it was written within the lifetime of the people that were with him. So.
Awesome, thanks for bringing that.
And I'll pass out one more just because, and then we'll wrap things up here. And this is an example of the art, more of what you see a lot on the website. And you can highlight this to people as well, is that some of them are almost just like articles, like a 2-page article. And so this is kind of an example of one of those. And then it's about how was the Bible formed. So this is one of the things that comes off that website. And what I thought we could do is just, because the section on tensions in the stories is why should I trust the Bible? And if anybody does have kind of like questions on this, like what was the criteria that we get the Bible together? One is we've got all this documentation about the different versions that there were, all the manuscripts, where it was written. But on the second page, there's 3 points. So if somebody just wants to...
Are there more of these copies?
There.
That's all I've got. So I did 15. I may be a couple short. So if you want to at least just share, but again, you can print any of these off, and I don't know if if there's some that you want to have available to everybody, or if you want to leave that up to facilitators. But
I think as we go along, we'll be deciding. There's so many of them, but I'm
She doesn't have ones, we have.
Right, but I'm talking about as we go through our 10 weeks, we
Right.
may decide to we might bring you some and say this week we're going to be talking about this handout. There are so many on the Starting Point website that we hope you have time to look at them all because they're awesome.
I printed them all out.
Take a PDF and
That's
send it
what
with
these are.
your homework or your
Exactly.
reminder
Yeah.
for them.
yeah, because
Exactly.
these are just PDF
Then
documents
you
that
don't
are
have to
there.
print them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I printed them all out. I mean, it is
Okay.
doable.
You're a good student.
But there's on some, now what I would say
And color?
is there's
Well, that's
probably only the first couple of chapters that you would even need to look at the PDF documents, because I think with this one, like scripture, and the next one, it kind of deals with creation. So, and that's typically where, so you don't get sidetracked with where were the dinosaurs and, how did they get 2 of everything on the ark, and, so that you don't end up going down those paths, because you don't want it, the Starting Point isn't about that. Like, it isn't a, answer all these detailed questions, but there are places that you can point people to. You can bring some things if you want to, so that you can kind of divert people to, so it doesn't take up the time, because a lot of the time we just want to really focus on, what's the meat of it, or what's that key point that we want to drive home. But I always like to, maybe this is just my background too, of just kind of wanting to understand, it's like, what was the criteria of how things were introduced into the Bible? And there's three things here. So, one is apostolic authorship. So what does that mean to anybody? Does anybody have any idea? What does that mean by apostolic authorship?
The apostles,
Right.
came from the apostles.
So it came from the apostles. I think to Marcy's point, where she was talking about primary source, is that we've got some idea that it was back, that there was an eyewitness there, that these are coming from the people that were there. What about widespread uses and acceptance? What do you think that means?
It's
Was
kind of like
available.
when they found all of those manuscripts in Egypt.
Right.
Why would you like Egypt?
Yeah.
So, is that
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, it's widespread usage and is like, if kind of understanding what happened is all these churches started up and all over, the Mediterranean and Europe, and you would find this group teaching the same thing as this group. So there was kind of a very widely accepted distribution of this material, and they were all teaching the same thing. So, that is kind of like, so like imagine if some years back, there was this guy in Waco, Texas, right? David Koresh. He had a group, the Branch Davidians. He was a religious leader, and he was a very prolific writer. If we fast forward 1,000 years into the future, and somebody found some of that writings, what would they look at? They would say, well, what do we know about this group? And, we know from other accounts that this group was a fringe group, that this was, this one person. It wasn't widely distributed. And so when you hear those things that, because, this was really what, a few years back when they had, what was the book?
Fully Davidian.
Oh, I think you were right on track there.
The Da Vinci Code, right?
Da Vinci Code, yeah, because Doug preached about it.
Right, so the whole premise there was that there's other books out there, and they're being hidden. They're being hidden from everybody, right? And then all of a sudden we love kind of the WikiLeaks, or we love the conspiracy theory
or whatever.
that these are all, there must be some problems, right?
Yeah, Doug gave an example of, what if I told you my great-grandmother married John F. Kennedy, or I forget who it was, and somehow got into a link with Fidel Castro. And he said, how many would believe that? I forget what it was. It was some ridiculous story. And of course, no one did. He said, okay, let's go out 2,000 years. And he's got a stack of documentation here. and people run across that, and they'll think, that must be true.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. So I think the widespread uses and acceptance, and then the last point is conformity to the rule of faith. So what is that? How do you interpret? Do you look at that section there? Conformity to the rule of faith.
Maybe that's like they weren't, nobody tried to do God plus and add some things in, and they just tried to stay true to what was originally written and done, and try to avoid getting distracted by more recent things.
Yeah. So any other kind of like, if you're thinking about, or if you've had a chance to conformity to the rules of faith?